One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. They give us nothing.
One of the brightest lights after the darkness of 9/11 came from a remote town.
Nearly 7,000 passengers and crew members suddenly found themselves landing in the tiny town of Gander in Newfoundland.
They didn't have to do what they did for us. They could have just looked the other way, but they didn't.
Canadians are joining the fight against the LA wildfires.
Crews from Canada rushed in to help and are making a considerable effort.
Canada has secretly helped 6 American diplomats escape from Iran.
The idea that Canada is only taking from the United States is fundamentally wrong.
When the U.S. went into Afghanistan, Canada was stationed in one of the most dangerous areas.
We would never forget what they had done for us.
We're Canadian, and we show up. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. When others need help, we don't wait to be asked. And yet somehow, 77 million Americans and one orange guy in the White House seem to have forgotten that. Forgotten what friendship looks like. Forgotten who showed up when it mattered. When hurricanes tore through your homes, Canada showed up. When ice storms knocked out your power, it was Canadian hydro crews who crossed the border to help. When you went to war, we were right there. Front line, shoulder to shoulder. When your forest burned, we were there too. And during your darkest times, on 9/11, we welcomed thousands of your citizens. Today, I want to shift the focus. No headlines or politics. No Governor Mills. No tourism charts. No clips of failing U.S. businesses. Because today is Canada Day, and there's no better time to talk about Operation Yellow Ribbon. This video is a reminder of who we are as Canadians, what we've done, and who we've always been to our neighbors. This is my longest video yet, which means, yes, you're about to witness some painfully average editing. But hang in there till the end. The message is worth it. And to our US viewers, if this is the first time you're hearing about Operation Yellow Ribbon, I hope it is a great reminder of who your neighbors are to the north. Let's get into it.
In the moments after the September 11th terrorist attacks, United States airspace was closed. Hundreds of inbound flights needed a safe place to land. One of those places was Gander, Newfoundland.
Once you get halfway across the ocean, the closest airport is Gander. And at that day, they were told to land at the nearest airport. And 38 aircraft was nearer to Gander than they were any other airport.
I get this call, get up in back of the airport. So I go up there, and I'm just in awe. I watch this big jet come in, and I look again, and there's lights of another one.
Now here's something a lot of people forget, or never even knew in the first place. On September 11th, 2001, the town of Gander, Newfoundland had a population of just under 10,000 people. To be exact, around 9,651 residents. They were living their ordinary lives. Teachers, nurses, shopkeepers, retirees. A town where most people knew each other by name. And then, without warning, 38 planes were forced to land there. That meant 6,579 unexpected passengers. Frightened, confused, and stuck. That's nearly a 70% increase in population overnight. Imagine that. You wake up on a Tuesday and by lunchtime your town has almost doubled. Thousands of strangers suddenly need food, beds, toiletries, medication. They don't even have luggage since they weren't allowed to remove it from the plane. And there was no blueprint, no warning, no government-issued instructions. Just neighbors, community halls, school gyms, spare bedrooms, all opened without hesitation.
I go, oh, God.
The night the planes landed here, I was at the Legion, and the first thing come out of my mouth was, thank God they're coming here because I know they're going to be looked after. Not saying they wouldn't be looked after elsewhere, but I knew they would be looked after here.
Nearly 7,000 shaken and disoriented passengers arrived in Gander, almost doubling the population of the tiny Canadian town.
A plan of action went into place just like that, and that's what the whole community became involved with.
I don't know of anybody who didn't do something, be it something big or something small. Everybody seemed to have done something because you knew it had to be done.
All across Gander, people opened their doors to stranded passengers, including over 700 at a local primary school.
The teachers went home that day and emptied out their linen closet, took every blanket and pillow that was not on the bed, and they brought it back to the school.
There's something I want to point out. Not a single one of those Canadians, the ones who stepped in on 9/11, asked, where are they from? What did they think about Canada? Who did they vote for? None of that mattered, because that's not how Canadians think. Those are questions that come from a transactional mindset, the kind of questions you'd expect from someone like Donald Trump, and probably from a lot of the 77 million people who cheer him on. But that's not what happened in Gander. People didn't wait for orders. They didn't ask for permission. They left work early. They picked their kids up from school. They rushed to the airport. They opened their homes. They gave away towels, spare clothes, extra blankets, whatever they had. It didn't matter if the person getting off the plane was American, European, Muslim, Jewish, black, white. None of it mattered. They were people. They were scared. They needed help. And that's what Canadians do.
By early morning, maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, we had had 4 flights arrive at Gander Academy. We kind of went on adrenaline. I know I didn't go home and sleep until 72 hours later. It just went on for days, and everything that we needed seemed to come. And I still don't know how that happened.
I know how it happened. It wasn't orders from Ottawa. It wasn't some emergency protocol, because there wasn't one for this magnitude. It was the people of Gander. Ordinary Canadians who chose compassion over comfort and transactions. Just when you think supplies would run out, someone else stepped up. A neighbor brought extra food. A store gave what it had. Blankets, clothes, beds, all shared without hesitation. They just saw people who needed help, and helped.
This is one from a school teacher in Montclair, New Jersey. He sent me that on the first anniversary. People invited them into their homes, gave them keys to their cars, the keys to their home, and never blinked twice about it.
The generosity of the people of Gander was a bright spot on one of the world's darkest days.
When it was all over, I was never more prouder that the greatest strength we have is our people, and we have great people here in Gander.
This first clip shows the sheer scale of what happened on 9/11. Not just the chaos in the skies, but the sudden reality that hit the town of Gander. A place with fewer than 10,000 residents, completely caught off guard, but not for a second caught unprepared. They didn't have much in terms of supplies, but what they had, they gave, all of it. And somehow, it was enough. Now, this next video, from 60 Minutes Australia, goes even deeper. It captures more than just the logistics and confusion of that day. It shows the people, the bonds that formed, the relationships that lasted long after the planes left. I'll be skipping ahead a bit, but if you want to watch the full video, the link's in the description below. Let's get into it.
38 commercial airliners with 7,000 passengers landed in quick succession. For locals who'd flocked to the airport in droves, it was an unforgettable sight.
Every plane that we had was treated as a bomb, so they had to stay at the tarmac. People weren't allowed off or anything. So it was probably 7 or 8 hours. In 9 hours, we realized that, hey, those people aren't going anywhere soon.
With the influx of unexpected guests, in a few short hours, Gander's population almost doubled. Julia and Ian's Boeing 777 was the 22nd plane to land in Gander. They would spend the next 26 tortuous hours on the tarmac, some of the last on Earth to learn of the terror attacks from radio reports fed through the plane's audio system.
We had received a report through our communication lines that what would appear to be maybe a terrorist activity or hijacking has occurred.
It was quite horrific to hear it being piped in and just listening to the events as they unfold there in New York and elsewhere.
We were just grief-stricken, just as the rest of the world obviously had been earlier in the day.
As they finally emerged into the Gander sunshine, the scale of what was going on finally hit them.
It wasn't until you actually got to the bottom of the stairs and then you did the 360 and looked around at these huge aircraft all around you. That to me was just, something I'll never forget.
The passengers filed into the airport terminal, hungry, exhausted, and full of uncertainty.
At the time, it was quite scary, and there was a lot of trepidation and anxiety because we just didn't know what was going to happen to us.
We didn't really know what the future held.
The passengers, fondly known as the Plane People, came from 95 different countries, from all walks of life. Some didn't speak English. Others had never heard of Canada, let alone Gander.
I can't even begin to imagine the fear those passengers felt. You're mid-flight, suddenly diverted with almost no explanation, to somewhere you've never heard of. Then you land and find out there's been a terrorist attack. Not just one plane, but multiple. If I were on board, my first thought would have been, is this plane next? And that fear didn't stop when the wheels hit the runway. The RCMP in Gander had to consider the very real possibility that one of those flights could still be compromised. Now, here's something I've been thinking about, especially with how tense things are politically right now. If this same situation happened today, but reversed, but those planes had to land in the US instead of Canada, would they be met with the same compassion Gander showed, or would every passenger be treated like a suspect and detained? It's something that stuck with me for a while. And I'm curious, what do you think would happen if the roles were reversed? Let me know in the comments.
All were immediately welcomed by a special brand of Newfoundland compassion.
I guess the biggest challenge for the Plane People, they were just wondering if this was real, or are those people setting us up? Are they going to rob us, or what are they going to do? Because most of them had never experienced the kindness and generosity that they were receiving.
Chicken and beef and turkey and ham.
By now, an operation of military precision was in full swing. With Gander overflowing, communities close by pitched in. In the tiny village of Gambo, at the Salvation Army Church, Teresa Antonetti was getting ready for the challenge of a lifetime.
I remember getting the call saying, you have to get our church ready for 198 passengers.
And what was your reaction in that moment?
Where do I begin?
Like their fellow passengers, Ian and Julia had to leave their luggage behind, so had little more than the clothes on their backs.
We were taken to Salvation Army Church, which is to be our refuge for the next 5 days.
And there were double beds waiting.
Oh, yes.
Double beds.
Five-star accommodation. Actually, it was 5-star, really.
Like every other available space in the area, Gambo's church became a massive dormitory. The men slept on the pews, the women in military camp beds. But Gambo Church was much more than just board and lodging.
I felt they just needed somebody to be there for them. They just needed a friendly smile. They just needed a welcoming face.
The Plane People may have been complete strangers, but to the Gander community, they were simply people in need.
They were people in need. That's all that mattered. You'll notice she never once mentioned race, religion, or nationality, because the people of Gander didn't ask. They didn't care if you spoke English or not. The Plane People needed help, and they gave it, and asked for nothing in return. No conditions, no filters. What really stuck with me was how fast they pulled it together. One of the churches managed to set up space for over 180 people in just hours. That's not an easy thing to do. And that was just one location. There were nearly 7,000 people stranded across the town. Every spare room, school gym, and hallway turned into a shelter. They weren't trained for this. They just stepped up.
We had 9,300 people living in town, and I would venture to say that 6,000 of them was volunteering at something. When that all came together, what seemed like a monumental task was really not.
Did you get much sleep, though, that week?
I never went home for 5 days.
For a community nearly 2,000 kilometres from New York, the terror strikes felt so much closer when two of their visitors shared news of the loss of their son.
We had a couple here in Gander that had a son who was a firefighter in New York. They found his body in the stairwell. So, you know, that was very emotional. All of a sudden, those people were like family to you. And not only did they have a tragic loss, but the community felt a great sense of loss.
And already stranded far from home, Julia and Ian also had their own shocking news to deal with. Ian and Julia Campbell were stranded in Newfoundland. when, in the midst of the trauma of the 9/11 attacks, they got news their son Hamish was in trouble on a surfing holiday.
We had found out that our son, who was in Indonesia at the time, had a staph infection, and he had been told by the doctors in Indonesia that his foot should be amputated.
Not a time when you want to be in one of the most remote places on the planet.
No.
I was devastated. Not only were they dealing with everything that was happening in New York City and being in this small town that they knew nothing about, now they had their own things to deal with.
Teresa Antonetti, who ran the Salvation Army Church, turned out to be their angel, helping them coordinate an airlift for their son.
We did manage to get Hamish flown back to Sydney, and he managed to, have his foot saved. We're really grateful.
What happened in Gander wasn't just about food, shelter, or safety. It was about stepping into someone else's crisis and staying there with them until they made it through. These weren't just passengers. They were scared, stuck, and completely cut off from their families. And instead of saying, "That's not my problem," or pointing them to someone else, one woman, who didn't even know their name a few days earlier, took it upon herself to help arrange an overseas medical evacuation. Not because she had to, but because she could. That's what makes this story different. It wasn't just kindness. It was commitment to total strangers in their worst moment.
For all the plane people, there was much stress and anxiety. But over 5 days of heartwarming hospitality, the people of Gander and Gambo not only nurtured, but also entertained. Forging deep friendships and bonds before it was finally time to go.
On the first day, we had 7,000 strangers. On the third day, we had 7,000 friends. And on the fifth day, we lost 7,000 family members. That's how close we became to those people.
It was a very emotional time saying goodbye to each other, because we obviously had come to know these people very, very closely, and it was a sad time to say goodbye.
Now living in Ottawa, Teresa hasn't been back to Gambo's church for the best part of 2 decades.
Wow, nothing has changed in 20 years, really.
Why was it so easy? Why did it come so naturally to you and your community to help these people, these absolute strangers?
That's the only way we know how to be. We didn't even give it a second thought. We just went into work mode and we did it.
And this is Teresa.
Yeah.
The lovely Teresa who took care of everybody.
Yes.
To Ian and Julia, Teresa epitomises the care and compassion of the Newfoundland people. But it's Teresa who is grateful.
The whole experience that week, it was such a reward for us to be able to show people in need really what we could do for them and how we could help.
Teresa has not seen Ian and Julia since that last farewell. Would you like to see them again?
Absolutely.
But today, thanks to a little technology, they have the next best thing. Well, I've found 2 of your friends, just hiding here.
Hi, Teresa.
Hello, wonderful lady. How are you?
You were amazing. You know how much we appreciated everything you did. And we miss you. And honestly, if we're going to desperately try to get back there next year.
Does that surprise you after 20 years that those feelings are still so strong?
No. It was such a strong feeling at the time that it's impossible for it to go away.
Out of all the tragedy that unfolded on 9/11, something remarkable happened. New friendships were formed. Complete strangers became extended family. And that never would have happened without the people of Gander, Newfoundland. Their kindness didn't just help, it changed lives. I'm proud of what they did. And to anyone watching who was part of that effort, thank you. You reminded the world who Canada really is. Now, I know this video has been a bit longer, but if you're still here, it's almost finished. But there's one more story I want to share. It's one that doesn't get as much attention. A video I found from the Vancouver Airport's YouTube channel showing what happened on the West Coast during 9/11. Because when the airspace shut down, it wasn't just Gander, it was coast to coast. And while Gander handled the heaviest load for its size, airports like Vancouver had to step up too. So before we wrap this up, let's take a look at how it unfolded out west.
Of course, as the second one hit, it's even more shock and disbelief, and then you knew something really big and bad was happening.
After that, really the next thought was, I better get into work. This is not good. There are planes obviously hitting the Twin Towers, and this obviously is going to have an effect on the aviation community.
I walked immediately into our airport operations center and checked in with our shift manager just to see if he'd heard the news too, and then we started to collect more information on the situation. I received a phone call from Nav Canada, the air navigation services provider here. They indicated that there were some airspace closures. The airspace was closing down, and the first request was how many aircraft could Vancouver Airport take. So we had to do an on-the-spot calculation and give them a number so that they knew what they could divert into Vancouver. And from that point forward, it was just managing the flow of traffic and developing a plan to land the aircraft, stage them, and then eventually bring them into the terminal building for offloading throughout the day.
When 9/11 happened, I was in my late teens, just a punk kid who didn't really grasp the full weight of what was unfolding. I had a few friends working at YVR back then. They called me that morning and said it was chaos. Nobody knew what was coming next, but I do remember the constant news updates, plane after plane being rerouted to Vancouver. And just like Gander, people in the city stepped up, donating what they could, offering rides, helping however possible. It wasn't about recognition. It was about doing the right thing, even when no one asked them to.
34 aircraft en route to North America over the North Pacific, carrying more than 8,000 passengers, were diverted here to YVR.
So we had thousands and thousands of people, confused travelers, not knowing when they were going to be able to get on their flights, what was happening. We were asked to go down on the floor and start helping with passengers that were going to be delayed. We basically downed tools from our normal jobs, and we went into a customer care role to make sure that the people that were in the airport were able to have some questions answered as best we possibly could. Of course, at that time, that early time, nobody had any answers.
Didn't worry about pulling their luggage off the aircraft. It was just to get the people off the planes, to get them more comfortable. We were actually sending catering out to the planes while they were waiting and queued up to offload here at the airport, because you can imagine some of those planes actually sat out there for 6 to 8 hours.
This airport stands out as a symbol of what neighbors and friends do when adversity strikes.
The phones were ringing off the hook with people saying, you know, if you need somebody needs a bed for the night, you know, we're here, we live in Richmond, this is our phone number, let us know. And so through the chaplain's office and our customer care team, we placed a lot of people through that means.
Just like Gander and airports across the country, Canadians didn't wait for instructions. They rushed to the terminals. They brought food, toiletries, and anything else that was required. Some even opened up their homes to complete strangers. Most of them likely American citizens, just trying to get home. No red tape, no questions. We opened the door and said, "What do you need?" Zero hesitation. That's who we are as Canadians.
Volunteers showed up here handing out water, blankets, clothing. Salvation Army was here. Various social service agencies from Vancouver and Richmond. Of course, the police and fire were here and very cooperative. So it really was a tremendous team effort.
So here's an aerial shot of our tent city. So here you'll see the tent set up with the bridge going over to the domestic terminal, which was under construction at the time. This would have been international passengers waiting to be able to go over the bridge here to the international terminal. I think it was such an extraordinary, unique situation. Passengers were amazingly patient, and after a while I think people learnt to just say, okay, we don't know when we're going to get out of here, so we might as well make the best of it. I'm quite certain that there were some new friendships and, you know, who knows, maybe even some romantic relationships. We had an absolutely incredibly unique situation here at YVR. Nobody obviously expected it, but it was an opportunity for the YVR community to come together, and boy did they ever.
So there you have it. 2 stories from opposite ends of the country, both tied to the same moment in history, and both showing something deeply Canadian. the instinct to stop what we're doing and help. The chart you're about to see shows how many planes were grounded across Canada and how many each airport took in. But I don't need the numbers to know the effort was the same everywhere. Big cities, small towns, Canadians stepped up. Now, why show this on Canada Day? Because I think some of us need the reminder of who we are, of what we do, even when no one's watching. Especially now, with the political tension coming out of the US, with the orange guy taking shots at us like we don't matter. But the real reason I made this video is for them south of us, to show them what kind of friend Canada has always been. To explain, maybe for the first time, why so many of us are hurt and pissed off. We didn't deserve this treatment. And yet, if something like 9/11 happened again tomorrow, we'd probably still help. Because that's who we are. And deep down, we know it's the right thing to do. So if you're still here, I want to wish you a happy Canada Day to you and your family. If this video meant something to you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need that reminder too. And if you're not done yet, check out the other videos on screen now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.